It's time for some more butt crack cycles. And today we are going to talk about why everyone hates Sportsters. Like this red one sitting right behind me. Okay, so before we jump too far into this, if you're a regular viewer of this channel and you're wondering, gee, why is Paul doing another talking head video about just general motorcycle stuff? Don't worry, there's a video coming out about this bike and kind of wrapping it up very soon, and I've also been interrupted by a cock. I've also been working on my shovel head, so there should be one about that out soon, but these are just kind of fun videos that I like to do in between. Hang on. I'm gonna go feed the chickens and maybe he will shut up. Okay, we're back. So, the Sportster's been in production since 1957. It replaced the earlier K model, and this kind of goes without saying, but for the longest time, if you bought a Harley, you pretty much only bought one of two models. You bought a small bike, which was the K model, or later the Sportster, or you bought the big bike. And that was really it. It wasn't really until, the FX series came out that you had some kind of choice. You could buy a Sportster, an FX, or an FL. But it hasn't really been until like the 90s or 2000s that Harley made like 85 different models of bikes, which these days they are all very confusing to me and I can't keep any of them straight. Anyways, I'm rambling about things that aren't Sportsters. Why do people hate Sportsters? Where does this come from? Have people always hated Sportsters, or is this a new thing? The Sportster has always been sort of the entry-level Harley, and it wasn't necessarily marketed that way from the beginning, but that's kind of the way things went. And starting somewhere in the 80s, they ran an ad campaign that essentially was, this is your ticket in. If you buy a Sportster, it's the cheapest Harley you can buy, and now you are in the club. And some of this, especially like in the 60s and 70s, was in response to Honda's ad campaign about you meet the nicest people on a Harley, or see what I did there? You meet the nicest people on a Honda, basically insinuating that everyone you meet on a Harley is an outlaw or a miscreant. So they started trying to clean up their marketing a little bit and marketing bikes towards people who maybe, weren't like me. They don't have a beard, they don't work a factory job or a manual labor job. They were marketing these bikes as, practical, small, cheap, American-made transportation. Buy this Harley because it's a higher quality product than the Honda. They were lying. But I think that is where you start to see this, thought process come about that Sportsters are only for beginners or only for women. You hear that all the time, that they're girls' bikes, which is really funny because you look back in history, and historically the Sportster has always been, or at least was in, the days of the Ironheads especially, that was Harley's actual, sport bike, hence the name. It is, in my opinion, arguably the best bike that Harley-Davidson ever made. Why? Well, it's smaller, it's lighter, has better power to weight ratio often than the bigger bikes. They're, low to the ground, they're comfortable to ride, but what I like about a Sportster is that you can really feel the riding experience. You aren't so isolated by this huge bagger on air suspension with floorboards and fairing and a radio and Bluetooth and all of this other crap that you don't need on a motorcycle. It's so funny to me how many guys these days go buy this full touring package bike and they finance it through the dealership and they never take it on a big long trip. All they do with it is ride it on Saturdays when it's sunny, 15 miles to their local bar with their other buddies on their big touring bikes, and then go park it in the garage, and then 10 years later, sell it. And it'll be a 2012 bike with 16,000 miles on it because it never got ridden. And it's funny to me that those same people who are like, you have to buy a big bike to have a real bike and be a real biker, probably aren't the best riders oftentimes. And I don't think that a big bike like that is conducive to good riding. Those are hard bikes to ride if you want to ride them aggressively and sportily, and they're not set up for that. They're just set up to lean back and hang onto the handlebars and munch up the miles in a straight line on the interstate in maximum comfort. A Sportster, though, from day one was made to go around curves and go fast, and they were stripped down and basic. Guys like Sonny Barger, the founder of the Hells Angels, rode Sportsters. Other notable figures in Harley-Davidson history rode Sportsters. The Sportster has also been the choice of motorcycle for pretty much anyone who has been running a Harley-Davidson in any kind of competition motorsports in the last 50 years. You look at the XR 750, and then later in the 80s, the XR 1000. You've got bikes like Lucifer's Hammer that was built by Tilley and rode by Gene Church. And that was a successful road racing motorcycle, an American-made V-twin Harley-Davidson that went fast and outran European bikes. You've got guys like Leo Payne, who ran Sportsters at the drag strip and at Bonneville and the Salt Flats and land speed racing. Pretty much, if you look back through history, guys aren't building big bikes to go race with. They were building fast bikes out of Sportsters. So why does everybody hate them? I think a lot of it is just perception. These bikes, like I said, were marketed as beginner bikes and bikes that were friendly for women. And many Harley-Davidson owners fit that South Park episode stereotype. They are guys who are just cosplaying as Billy Badass on the weekend with all their leather and patches and tassels and whatever. And there's so much of that sort of just macho, I have to project how much of a man I am onto the world. And the way I'm going to do it is by riding the biggest bike possible, because big means I'm a man. And this kind of brings me to one of the big ironies of Harley-Davidson culture to me. And it's that many people who ride Harleys do so because they want to be free. They perceive this as sort of a culture outside of regular culture. It's a subculture that promotes and encourages expression and freedom of choice and being different from everybody else and of being unique, and no one can tell me what to do because I'm free. And despite all of this crowing about nonconformity, so many people conform to the idea that you have to ride this kind of bike to be a real biker. And that's really just so strange to me that I don't really understand why, if someone else is riding with you, whether you're riding together in a group or you just meet this guy at a bar or somewhere or a show, why so many people feel the need to tell other people what they should ride. Or, I've had people say to me, look at a Sportster I've been on and say, when are you going to lose the training wheels and get a new bike or get a real bike? And my response is just like, never. I'm comfortable on a Sportster. I like Sportsters. I've ridden big bikes. I own a big bike. I've ridden touring bikes. I've ridden my buddy's Electroglide several times. It's a nice bike. It's not the bike for me. I don't like it. So I think that's the takeaway of this episode, and we're just going to wrap it up right here. If someone is hating on you about your Sportster, that says more about them than it does about you. If you're happy on your bike, ride your bike. Don't feel like you have to buy something big to fit in. And don't feel like you're not a real biker because you ride a little bike like this. Okay. I think that's it. I think I've said everything I want to say. I'm going to go edit this together, and thanks for watching another episode. There'll be some more exciting stuff with motorcycles running and me working on stuff coming out soon, but that's it for today.